Thank you for being here. Today I am joined by Cynthia Bland, founder and CEO of Voice Found, a Canadian nonprofit organization committed to preventing child sexual abuse. The organization proactively supports the physical, financial, and emotional healing and recovery of individuals and communities. Their mission is to reduce the social and economic impact of childhood sexual abuse on victims and their surrounding worlds. Cynthia's brave work is a testament to her resolve and unwavering conviction to fight this issue and to push for change. Simone Bell is a speaker, experiential advisor, and peer mentor for Voice Found. She is an incredibly strong woman who has survived human trafficking and has an incredible story to share. The Saving the Girl Next Door Act is only possible because of the willingness of Cynthia and Simone, as well as others, to come forward and discuss. They are able to tell us what is really happening in the dark world of sexual exploitation and human trafficking. Most commendable, they continue to fight in the spotlight, or not, for recovery, for support, for advocacy, and for change. I'm honored to have worked with Cynthia and Simone in consultation as well with many others in understanding what is happening and what needs to be done. One united message is clear. Time for action is now. We cannot let one more innocent soul become a statistic. The Saving the Girl Next Door Act is named as such because we can identify that 90% of victims in Canada are Canadian-born. It is a fact we all need to absorb. This bill is constructed purposely to supply immediate, impactful steps to Ontario law that will evoke momentous action. Manitoba has led the way. Ontario is too far behind and must act now. The Saving the Girl Next Door Act focuses on three main areas. One is acknowledging the importance of continued dialogue and action. The bill proclaims every February 22nd as a day for human trafficking awareness. Second, the bill expands current laws to create immediate impact. Courts will be allowed to make heavily weighted protection orders against perpetrators of human trafficking or child exploitation. If traffickers then breach this protection order, they would face a penalty of up to $50,000 or up to 2 years of jail or both. As well, a new tort or civil action has been included, which will give survivors a way to seek justice. There are devastating effects suffered by victims, and recovery is emotionally and financially difficult. Third, the Saving the Girl Next Door Act will raise public awareness of traffickers through the use of current legislation. It will expand the definition of sex offense under Christopher's Law to include offenses related to the trafficking and prostitution of persons under the age of 18. Human trafficking is a heinous crime. We must beat this crisis. This is happening right under our noses, in our neighborhoods and communities. I want to let you hear from the voices of Cynthia and Simone directly as we call on all parties to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hi, I am Cynthia Bland, and I'm a survivor of child sex abuse starting from the age of 5. I know firsthand the devastating consequences of abuse, the shame, and the trauma. I held on to my secret for 42 years, and when I disclosed and began healing, I recognized that more needed to be done. I knew we needed to address the consequences of child sex abuse, one of which is re-victimization and trafficking. And so that's when I founded Voice Found, a survivor-led nonprofit that educates individuals and organizations on how to identify, prevent, and respond to child sex abuse and commercial sexual exploitation, in other words, sex trafficking. Through Voice Found's Project Thrive, we provide support and healing opportunities for those who have been prostituted or seek to exit the sex trade in Eastern Ontario. Sex trafficking is a growing and significant issue in Ontario. The average age when many girls are first trafficked into prostitution is 14. Many don't even recognize that they've been trafficked until it's too late. Traffickers are skilled at identifying potential victims, systematically breaking down their barriers, and eventually controlling their minds and actions. We know firsthand the devastating consequences of sexual exploitation and how challenging it can be to bring perpetrators to trial and to see justice done. Every day, my colleagues and I are on the front line, helping survivors to rebuild their lives. We help them as they seek shelter and refuge. We understand the pain of addiction, the trauma, and the challenges they face as they rebuild their lives. I see the proposed act as a necessary step forward to protect survivors as they begin to heal and deal with the devastating consequences of being trafficked. In addition, it provides law enforcement with additional tools to bring traffickers to justice. The proposed fine for breaching a protection order provides a deterrent, and the minimum 3-year time limit will recognize the need for victims to be protected from potential influence and/or harm from their traffickers. Victims of human trafficking do not consent ever to any conduct while they are under the control of their trafficker. They are manipulated, even when they may not recognize it at the time. The proposed new tort will allow a victim to sue their trafficker and rest in the knowledge that consent to conduct cannot be used by the defense, nor does proof of damage need to be presented. Damage to persons who have been trafficked are well documented and are significant. The addition of language specific to human trafficking in proposed changes to Christopher's Law further aids in the protection of the most vulnerable in the fight against this crime. We must do all we can to protect our children and youth. We must do all we can to provide law enforcement with tools required to bring traffickers to justice. We must do all we can to help survivors to rebuild their lives so that they can thrive and live a full and hope-filled life. I hope this bill will be supported. This is an issue that is affecting every one of us, and the cost to the victim and to society is huge. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Simone and I'm a survivor of trafficking in Ontario. My individual story is one like many others, and my path to healing and justice is my own. Today, as someone who provides support services and peer support to individuals harmed by this criminal activity, I fully support the proposed legislation for Ontario. My experience, like many other youth that we know are being exploited. In fact, I would say that I was one of the many hidden faces of human trafficking in Ontario. I was impacted at every level of my exploitation. My plight was invisible to the many provincial systems and frontline workers that should have protected me. Predators are tenacious. They prey on the vulnerabilities of poverty, addiction, learning disabilities, family breakdown, and the deep desire for relationship and connection. These are not relationships gone sideways. They are not prostitution agreements gone sideways. These situations are abuse. Instead, without asking the right questions, the circumstances, holding those criminals under scrutiny and judging me based on their perception of what I was doing or who or what I looked like, provincial frontline workers from law enforcement, ER physicians, nurses, and mental health professionals that I came into contact with missed many opportunities and to intervene and help me extricate me from the exploitive situation. As a survivor, I believe that any legislation needs to ensure that the police have the powers of investigation, protection, and victim referrals that are meaningful. Any provincial legislation must recognize the primacy of the Criminal Code, Section 279. As well, we must ensure that those victims, both the primary victim, the child, the youth, or the adult, and the secondary victim, including families and loved ones, are accorded their rights to information, protection, participation, restitution, and a complaint mechanism, as affirmed in the Canadian Victim Bill of Rights. Under 2 Section 79 of the Criminal Code, no youth under 18-year-old can be exploited. In particular, children or vulnerable teenage youth who are most at risk of being targeted, manipulated, and exploited cannot and must not be dismissed under the Child and Family Services legislation as being old enough to make their own decisions. Federal and provincial legislation must be aligned, but at its core and in implementation must put youth first. They need protection. They need our help. They need non-judgmental understanding. They need specialized support because their experiences and rehabilitation needs are unique and specialized from the level of trauma they have experienced. These legislative tools must be implemented federally and provincially and giving meaning and life because no child or youth is a prostitute. They are being prostituted, which is exploitation. It is human trafficking. Thanks.
Any questions that you might have? Yes, please.
My name's Keith Leslie. Simone, if I could ask, you mentioned that police, nurses, and social workers missed opportunities to help you to get out.
Yeah.
So you were clearly in situations where you thought you wanted help, but you couldn't ask for it yourself, I guess, in that situation?
Yeah.
You needed an adult or someone to reach out to you.
Nobody helped me come forward. While I was being trafficked, I had no idea what human trafficking was. So I didn't know how to ask for help. How can you ask for help for something that you have no understanding of what's actually happening to you?
And so, but this was in more than one situation. You talked about police, social workers, nurses. So this happened more than once that you would been.
It happened a lot. You're so traumatized and you're put in many situations. I was in hospitals, addictions facilities. I came into contact with the police at least 4 or 5 times during my exploitation, and not once did somebody really help me come forward.
You mentioned something that they were judging you by looks as well. Were they just assuming that by the way you looked, you were a prostitute who wanted to be a prostitute?
Yes, exactly.
They treated you as such.
Exactly. And that's the barrier that's put up against you that makes it even harder to come forward. How can you come forward when you feel like people are making you feel ashamed?
They're judging you right off the bat.
Yeah.
How old were you when this was going on?
I was 20, and it was over a 4-year period.
Laurie, you've mentioned before that there seems to be a lot of assumption wrong assumption that this was not happening to mainly Canadian girls. That it was like immigrants where they were being preyed upon. But it's not new Canadians that are the majority. It's actual local girls.
Right. It starts in Canada and it stays in Canada. We have statistics that over 90% of the victims are Canadian born. And I know in the Durham region, speaking with police services there, the victims that they've been able to rescue, they're 100% Canadian born. It is a problem that's happening right in our towns and our neighborhoods. And it is a crisis. And the government needs to take immediate actions.
In looking before we came here today, I saw a couple of charges against a trafficker in Burlington and another one, I think it was in Guelph, but there's not a lot, given the number of young women that we hear are trapped into this. We're not seeing an awful lot of charges. Simone, did the people who put you into trafficking, were they ever arrested and charged?
I went very far in going through with pressing charges, but I'm one of those people that I pulled out because I did not feel safe. I did not feel protected. I felt very vulnerable, and at the end of the day, as a victim of trafficking, when you go through the court system, what are you getting out of it at the end? So this is
nothing other than
nothing.
you're being judged all the way along, and perhaps the trafficker might visit.
Yeah, and then you have to go through court for a 4-week period, and there's no protection. So this is why this is so important.
So if, as we've seen, women who are victims of sexual assault or abuse are already reluctant to come forward to testify,
Yeah.
if you're someone who's been trafficked and you're already working whether you know it or not, as a prostitute, that's that much harder than to go to the court system.
Yeah, it's harder because I think while you're being trafficked, you're constantly being told that you're a criminal, that you're doing something wrong, that nobody's going to help you, that what you're doing is illegal and you're going to get into trouble and everybody's going to just shame you. So it's so much harder to come forward when there's all this stuff pushing you down and these people telling you that you're wrong, you're going to get into trouble. So it's so hard to come forward for many victims.
Laurie, the Premier in the House this morning, in response to you, said that she would have a comprehensive strategy or policy on this by June, and that it in all likelihood would go further than your private member's bill is doing. Was that encouraging, or does it sound like more reason to delay and you're not sure, you know, like, why not go now with what you've got and add more in June if you can?
Exactly. The government can take immediate actions now, and it has to before one more lost soul is dragged into this horrific evil practice that, as Simone has said, they need the means to get out from underneath and get away from traffickers. The protection order, they can bring that in right now to help rescue victims. It can be brought in by parents. It can be brought in with the victim if they're over 18. They're brought in by victim services, CAS, the police, and it's a minimum 3 years protection order from these traffickers. So that's, we've heard from the experts, not just here today, but as we've discussed, and I've been working on this issue, that 3 years is the minimum to start to recover, and it's also a deterrent for the trafficker to stay away from the girls.
Thank you very much.